Get started here. Those of you who don't know me, my name is Marty Goldberg. I work with the Legacy Engineering Group. The actual topic of today, and it was kind of misprinted, was about the Taco Bell Atari games that we did over last summer that I'm currently going to talk about right now. It's a group of some of the classic titles, Centipede, Asteroids, Lunar Lander, Breakout, that we did on contract with Atari for Taco Bell. They were being released with kids' meals for about 99 cents. And I'm kind of going to be talking about the design process for that, and then basically doing a Q&A if anybody has any questions in regards to any of that. These games themselves, we were contacted last April, May to do a series of games for Taco Bell. They basically wanted them to be kid-friendly. They wanted to be able to run on multiple platforms. So we wound up coding these actually in Flash and using what's a platform called Adobe Air to move them to multiple desktop platforms. So these are actually run on Mac, PC, and unofficially on Linux. We basically spec'd out the games for what they wanted. We originally wanted to do Missile Command. Taco Bell thought they it was going to be too warlike for kids. So I don't know what the deal was with that. But so we wound up spec'ing for Asteroids and Centipede and Breakout. They originally wanted Super Breakout. There wasn't enough time in the contract schedule for that. They basically started us 2 weeks behind before we even started. So I had about 6 weeks to do all 8 games, the classic and evolved versions, recoding each one from scratch. None of these are emulated, none of these ROMs. And then I went from there and had to do a quick debugging stage on it as well within about a week's time. I wound up coding for about 20 hours a day for 7 days a week, straight for about 6 weeks straight. So no life. Kind of like I feel right now after the BG Evo party last night, you know, one long hangover. But in the end, the products turned out pretty good. We wound up doing skill levels on each one. We basically had beginners, intermediate, and advanced. The advanced ones have basically closer to the arcade skill level. We had a number of interesting issues during the design process too with these, with regards to, again, making them kid-friendly. We tried to do the Asteroids just like Asteroids, and then they were like, well, no, they're moving too fast, the kid's not going to be able to handle that, or the ship's going to turn too quick, and we're like, well, this is how the game actually is. And we're like, you know, if we change the controls that much, it's going to be harder for the kids. And, you know, they didn't seem to care about that. They had everybody in their mind. Where they wanted us to start rotating Asteroids around and doing all this stuff like that. We're like, well, that's Asteroids Deluxe. That's not Asteroids. You know, it's like, you guys know your own properties. It's like, you know. So it was a lot of interesting thing, and, you know, they cracked their whip on it, on pretty much everything. But these finally came out. They got leaked early. They weren't supposed to be coming out until April, and then all the stores started bringing them out. They've been doing pretty good. It was an interesting process. We wound up, for the evolved games that are on here, we wound up having to do them similar to the ones that came out for on the PSP for their recent Atari Evolved collection. Tried tweaking some of the things as far as graphics-wise, because we weren't big fans of a lot of the colorful explosions they used and stuff like that. And it kind of came off like a rip-off of, you know, some of the Lamatron and Tempest 2000 graphics and things like that. So we wanted to tone that down. Design process, like I said, took about 6 weeks, cramming all that in and recoding every little thing from scratch, which is a real pain when you're not dealing with you know, all the original source code. You're not dealing with the original ROMs. So it wasn't just throwing up an emulator and just throwing a game in there, which, you know, anybody can do. Lunar Lander was pretty interesting because we got to do our own version of the Evolved games for that. And these are the actual models that I used, believe it or not. We digitized the actual Lunar Lander and tried to go with the anniversary of the moon landing. We actually have samples in there from the original '69 moon landing. So try to use scale models, believe it or not, it's a kid's toy, for the actual graphics for the for that stage, and the LEM docking stage, we had a bonus stage for that. It was actually a lot of fun working, going through all the NASA archives and going through all the, getting the samples that we wanted, and deciding how we were going to spruce up the graphics for the actual moon landscape and things like that too. Currently working on a couple other things, hopefully for Missile Command 30th anniversary, some updates for that. As far as, since the topic is said about the Legacy Engineering Group in general, we're also working on some Tron-related merchandise, hopefully that'll come out in relation to the new Tron movie that's coming out. Some new USB reproductions of the actual arcade game with lit up in blue LEDs, similar to what you saw on RetroThing.com. We actually OEM those. Those were USB joysticks that actually look like Atari 2600 joysticks, they're clear plastic. They light up with glowing blue. We've got all of our regular USB joysticks as well that we're doing out there. Working on some tabletop devices as well. Flashback platform, for those of you familiar, Flashback portable that I showed last year. We're still advancing on that too. That's going to be going to a multi-console and arcade platform as well. That we're looking to go around with either Atari or hopefully Time Warner and a couple other places too. We're partnering with a couple of people on that. So that's pretty much all in relation to those things. Are there any questions about anything material? Yeah?
Yeah, you said the Taco Bell games were 99 cents each.
Yeah, they're supposed to be.
I went to the local one here in Milwaukee and I got it for free.
Okay.
I don't know, are they scamming you, or is it...
They're scamming. No, that's the thing. They weren't supposed to release those until April, and all of a sudden, all the stores on their own. Each one's, because they're all, they're all under their independent ownership. Because they're basically franchises. They all decide what they want to do. I know, like the Taco Bell on Silver Spring over here was like trying to charge like $1 something a piece for them. The one up by me was just 99 cents. Some are just giving them away free with the kids' meals. It all depends how they want to do it.
Yeah, I just asked the Mexican dude at the counter. I just asked if I could have one to game me. I didn't want a kids' meal.
Well, you don't have to get a kids' meal to get it, but yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's basically all for it. We actually, we didn't have anything to do with the packaging on those, other than supplying the artwork. So the original Atari artwork on all those. Because basically, Kurt Mandel and myself, we do a lot of advising for the current Atari too, on a technical capacity and resources. Because the current Atari doesn't really have anything to do with the original Atari, other than they're the current owners of the IP and the brand name, things like that. So they usually come to us for a lot of the artwork. They come to us for technical advising on their IP, legal advice, all different resources. Kurt just got done supplying a lot of this stuff for that's going to be in the Microsoft arcade platform that just got launched. Anything to do with Atari with that, graphics-wise, or old artwork and that we supplied for that too. So I mean, it's a pretty good working relationship. I enjoy doing it. But as far as the packaging, we didn't have anything to do with that. That's why I got mislabeled as Super Breakout instead of Breakout. The Breakout on there, I actually worked with Al Alcorn on. He was the original designer of Pong, and he was lead engineer during the time of when Breakout was actually released. Breakout obviously has no ROM. It was a TTL-based logic game, so we actually worked through all of that. Reproducing the logic as close as possible. We also have a version of Pong that we did for that too, the original arcade Pong, and has all the bugs in it, what he calls bugs or features to him. So, there's some timing issues. So there's actually, like in the original Pong, there's actually a timing gap on the motion of the paddle, so that there's actually a hole at the top of the screen. That ball can still fit there, even though you move the paddle all the way up. If you tried to go by the actual plans for it, the circuit plans, you wouldn't be able to reproduce that because you wouldn't know it, because you're doing it obviously on a computer and it's not going to have those timing issues. So, but we work with him on that. In all the cases, even on the Asteroids, tried as much as possible to go back and talk to the original designers as we could, or go over some of the original plans. That's the other thing too, we kind of had our hands tied with a lot of the other ones with the evolved versions, because we have our own ideas on updating these games, and not usually in line with the stuff that was released as evolved or updated versions in the past. Our view, mainly because we have access to those resources, is you have to go, if you're going to update these games, you got to understand what the game's about. You can't just, what I call Nintendoize them, which is basically throw in a bunch of bosses, throw in power-ups, throw in all this stuff, and it has nothing to do with the original game, where it came from, what the original designers wanted to accomplish. So, and unfortunately, that's what happens with a lot of it. Like, you've got this new one that Atari is pushing on their site that they work with for some multiplayer missile command that they're pushing to their site through another company that does online games, and it really doesn't have anything to do with missile command. It's basically 2 bases, and you guys each take turns shooting missiles at stuff coming down, and they added a boss, and they added, exactly like I said, it doesn't really have anything to do with the original missile command, which had to do, which really was meant to portray more of that idea, maybe a little young for, but some of the older people may remember, that kind of nuclear anxiety that existed at that time, late 70s, early 80s. Especially during the Reagan era, you're always worried about war with the Russians, and you're worried about, those ICBMs when they're going to come in, kind of like war games. So it was actually meant to portray that, and they had to cut down on a lot of things for the game, for the technology at the time. So if you're going to do an update, you've got to understand where that's coming from and how you can actually update in relation to that original vision. And that's something that we try and do. And like I said, unfortunately, like for Centipede and Asteroids and things like that, we were tied that because Atari said that, well, we spent X amount of money on doing these updates with stainless, so we want to make sure and leverage those assets and keep doing that and keep working with that. So we had to use some of the graphical assets and sounds. We tried to tweak it as much as possible, like I said, to get away for the kind of what I call the Bittner rip-off type of thing with the exploding colors. It just took so much away from the gameplay with that stuff, with those updates. So, and like I said, hopefully we're pushing some other things down the pipeline, some other updates to the old properties too, because we really like working with those, and we have the resources to really do those justice with those. So.
How much will the Atari Flashback Portable cost?
The one that we're working on now, which is going to be hopefully a multi-platform thing, we're looking at a $75 price range, and that's going to be use SD cards that you're going to be able to load up different game packs and things on there too. And that's why it may not be through Atari, it may be through a different company as well. That's why we're trying to open it up to arcade and console platforms on there. We don't want to go the route of like a Dingo or GP2 X or things like that. We're not interested in releasing just a generic gaming console. This is specifically targeted towards a company, a specific company. They're going to release it just like the Atari Flashback was, the Flashback 1 and 2. So that we want to actually tie it to the company itself, just not a generic, because there's 1,000,001 generic little gaming handheld platforms out there. So. All right. Any other questions? Yeah.
Sorry if I missed this in the beginning. What was the motivation for Atari or Taco Bell to kind of team up for that? I don't necessarily associate like Asteroids with burritos.
Well, some people could after you eat the stuff. Basically, Taco Bell contacted Atari, and they were looking for something that would be fun for kids to play, kids to do. Atari, the brand itself, has a long history with fast food stuff, with different toys and things like that too, or related properties. And we go all the way back to the early 80s, whether it was glasses with properties printed on them, or they were giving away different things. So, I mean, all the way up to current stages. So they basically approached Atari, and then because of our working relationship, we got hired by Atari to actually do all the coding with that, and then do it to Taco Bell specifications. And like I said, that's what was weird. It was, we originally, because we proposed the games at first, and one of them was going to be Missile Command, and they were afraid that it was going to scare kids, because it was too warlike. Asteroids, that's fine. You're blowing up asteroids. You're shooting. It wasn't warlike, And then Centipede, you got these bugs coming at you. You're shooting, but that wasn't warlike. So whatever. It is what it is with that. But yeah, that's what they did. It was interesting too because these were actually done last summer, and there was actually a 6-month waiting time. They had a queue, which was interesting because this was my first time doing something for like the fast food industry and stuff like that. So basically, we found out, we learned a lot about their time schedule and what they like to do. Most restaurants have minimum 6 months lead time on all their toys and things that they give out. Like my understanding, McDonald's is like 2 years. So anything that's out now was actually done 2 years ago. It's just been sitting in there. I understand why they have to do that for toys, because if there's a product recall or there's testing, there's things wrong with it. Stuff like this, it was frustrating. It's like, we did all this work. I basically killed myself on this project, and it's like I wanted to come out, and it was crazy. And then, like I said, it wasn't. They literally had told us in the beginning of March, well, we're pushing back the date. It's not going to be until the beginning of April. And then all of a sudden, a week later, it's up on Kotaku because somebody started leaking it on Seattle, and then all the stores started selling it. Because they were going to do, I guess, a launch 1 week at a time, or something, or one game every couple of weeks or something like that. So that one didn't wind up working out that way. But yeah, I'm really happy with the way some of that turned out. Some of the stuff I had to cut back on because of the time schedule and because it was basically because of the format, because of it going for kids. Try to keep it as true to the arcade as possible, including in the graphics, which you guys should see too. But like Centipede and Asteroids, there's no extra lives, and that was a trade-off because of the skill levels being there. So because there's skill levels now, you don't need the extra lives as much too. Lunar Lander, we changed the scoring a little bit to reflect, number one, again, an easier format for kids to play. So we also, because you don't have the 5 levels of all the different options for the lander environment and everything, we basically went with just the basic 3 skill levels with that, and I just changed gravity accordingly and all the different issues with that. But like on the original arcade one, you can actually go, and when it's still at the portrait view, I actually scroll along the landscape before you go down into the magnified view. I mean, it literally make the entire landscape scroll. We only had one area for this because that's all we had time for. It also doesn't, I just have it randomly switch what the values are going to be for the landing. As far as that, the arcade version does a little bit different. Again, it is scoring, basically. The controls are a little easier too, because again, they were concerned and they kept on coming back with regards to that, where it's going to be too hard for the kids to control, things like that. So, we had to push back on certain things and give on others. So, but the end product turned out pretty good. I mean, I'm pretty happy with it. I wish I had more time. I wish I, could have mapped out every individual little thing and just do complete reproductions, because that's one of the fun things about doing this is, again, putting yourself, it's an opportunity to put yourself in the position of the original programmer, and rather than just throwing up some look-alike, and when you're trying to accurately reproduce things, you're given an opportunity to actually figure out the algorithms that they did and figure out, okay, why did they do this? Because this is what was available on that coin-op hardware. And this is how they had to, code this bit of code or code this loop or store this bit of data because of this is how it has to be processed on this hardware. Lunar Lander was interesting because, again, obviously it's not a vector hardware that we're on. So we actually had to do that bitmap titles. So you'll notice when you're going in Lunar Lander, it actually fills in portions of the screen as you're going instead of having the regular full vector graphics scrolling. So, and that's just how it had to be done in Flash, to get the frame rate. Pretty much all these games are not done as a normal Flash game. Flash games usually get like a bum rap because most of the people do it in a very cheap cinematic vector graphics, like basically watching like the old Hanna-Barbera cartoons with the same background going across all the time, and everybody's running and looking the same and everything. These were actually done in full bitmapped every little bit. Every single sprite, all the backgrounds. We actually used flash bitmap drawing capabilities. So that's how we got a higher frame rate than is normally possible on there, and pretty turned out pretty good. Any other questions?
This is only exclusive to Taco Bell?
Yeah, it's just a Taco Bell.
KFC
No, just Taco Bell. Well, if there's like a Taco Bell and KFC like in the same store, I'm sure you can get it there. But yeah.
Well, yeah, I guess my question was kind of related to his question about, so there was no anniversary coming up for Atari or anything. I'm curious what the impetus for the Taco Bell Corporation to come back and say, we want to revisit these games that are 25, 30 years old, not reinvent them or try to update them so they're not the game that they were.
Right.
And yeah, they're timeless. I think they're timeless, but kids today,
well,
play
unfortunately,
games are far more complicated on a daily basis than
that's very true.
So what's the draw to bring these back as the kid will prize, I guess?
Right.
And they weren't constantly hounding you, put more stuff in there.
Right.
Which it seems like they weren't.
Number one, like the age range is ages 3 and up. Unfortunately, because of the current generation, Atari properties and Atari games are usually thought of as something that little kids are going to be able to gravitate towards and play, because they're considered everything's simplistic. That's the rap it has. Yeah, very simplistic graphics, very simplistic gameplay, and so basically Taco Bell was like, okay, we need a new kids meal, something for the kids meal. What's something that's exciting that we can do for them, but that's still going to be accessible to them? Well, Atari games are like those are those old games. Those are those things that it should be real simple for them to play and pick up and all that. So that was, as far as I know, and from what I was told, that was the impetus for them approaching Atari to do those. It's good in one way. It's introducing the new generation to some of those game properties, and another way, I wish these games didn't have that rep, because anybody likes, knows, and loves to play them.
That's not true.
Yeah, it's not true. It's a shame. But and again, it's like talking. A lot of these guys that I'm dealing with in this, half of them were not even around for when these games were originally out. So I'm dealing with guys that are mainly, even the guys that are working at the current Atari, a lot of them are more Nintendo generation and later. These are guys that didn't grow up with these games. They don't have a context on a lot of them. They don't have an understanding of them, and they just treat them like these are old game properties. That was an issue a lot of years with the current Atari Infogrames group as well. They basically they didn't know what to do with their old properties, because here they wanted to establish Atari as this great new brand with new games, and they were originally treating the old properties like the redheaded stepchild type thing, and they release these like game rehash collections and things like that every so often. Now all of a sudden, after like 50 different management changes and all the stuff that they've gone through, now they're gravitating towards the original properties. They changed the logo back to the original old logo. It's like the new old Colt thing. We were happy for that. Unfortunately, these were all done and printed up before that happened, so they've got the bell-bottom logo, which I can't stand that one. But so they're finally starting to get into their old properties and actually celebrating them. And the same token, that's the problem when they go to release new products with them or new updates, like they did with the PSP games too, with the Evolved. It's like the guys doing it don't understand the properties at all, because they weren't around. It would be like, no different than somebody that loves like early NES games and just having some young kid, 20 years from now that just grew up on like PS3 stuff or something, going back and telling them to go, okay, now interpret these NES games. If they don't understand it or do a context, you're just going to throw what they know on it. You can't fault them at it, but at the same time, it's frustrating as hell, especially for people that are into, the classic properties like that. So, any other questions? I think that's about it then. Thank you for coming, thank you for your time, and what we're talking about. You don't have to eat the food, but you can eat the games.